escape from North Korea's hell, the harrowing story of a survivor. In a world that feels forgotten, one man managed to escape the hell of North Korea's most notorious prison. His haunting story exposed dark secrets that had never been revealed before, leaving the world in shock and disbelief. Before he found freedom, he lived in constant fear and cruelty, convinced that beyond the barbed wire was a world just as hellish as the one he was trapped in. North Korea, the so-called Hermit Kingdom, remains a place of silence and secrecy, where human rights violations are buried under lies and denial. In these camps, prisoners are held without trial, starved to the point of eating insects just to survive, and endure brutal torture and extrajudicial executions, all just a small glimpse of the horrors hidden within these infamous labor camps. The North Korean government denies everything, insisting that there are no prison camps or human rights violations, but brave defectors have exposed the truth. They risked their lives to escape, and through their painful testimonies, a chilling picture of the country's brutal prison system begins to emerge. Each story is a piece of a much darker puzzle, from children locked away in these camps since their early years to the souls crushed under the weight of torture and oppression. In the notorious prison camps of North Korea, where human rights are nearly non-existent and cruelty dominates, the daily reality is harrowing. Thousands of people endure unimaginable conditions, working for 17 hours straight without a single moment of rest. Life in these camps is so grueling that even pregnancy is not allowed to continue. Many women tragically lose their babies, even when they are 7 or 8 months pregnant, simply because they are forced to abort. The pain of this loss is indescribable. Daily food is a luxury. Each person is allotted only about 80 grams of corn a day, barely enough to stave off hunger. Their bodies become so emaciated that many weigh just 37 kg, and to survive, some resort to eating rats, insects, or even animal feed. What is even more chilling is the reason many of these people are imprisoned in the first place. One woman was detained for over a year, simply for complaining about the state of her dilapidated house. In the camp, she endured harsh punishments, including the cruel salt bath method. She was forced to immerse herself in a saltwater bath for 3 consecutive days, preventing her wounds from healing, which worsened her suffering and increased the risk of infection. These prison camps are a powerful tool used by the North Korean regime to maintain control over its citizens. In a country where poverty and oppression run deep, the fear of these camps keeps everyone in line. No one dares to speak out. For those who manage to escape, it's not just about finding freedom, but risking everything to survive. They cross forbidden borders, knowing that if they're caught, they'll face a lifetime of imprisonment, branded as enemies of the state, and endure consequences no one can imagine. In North Korea, it's not just the notorious prison camps that people fear. There are also labor camps where someone can be imprisoned for offenses so small they seem almost absurd. Watching a South Korean movie, humming a foreign song, or simply making a comment that's out of line with the government's views can lead to a life sentence. Inside these camps, prisoners endure unimaginable hardships, carrying heavy loads, working the fields day after day, and living in conditions that break their spirits. In fact, some are forced to dig their own graves, a grim reminder of the hopelessness that awaits them. Many people just vanish. No one knows whether they were ever released or if they ended up buried in an unmarked grave. For those who manage to escape and live to tell the tale, their stories are nothing short of horrific. But before we dive into one such escape from one of North Korea's worst camps, let's take a moment to consider the shocking and often absurd reasons people are thrown into these brutal places. In a country where freedom is a crime and dissent is met with the harshest punishments, even the smallest acts of rebellion can lead to a lifetime of suffering. The shocking reasons people end up in North Korean prisons. In North Korea, practically anything can be considered treason. Even a simple criticism of Kim Jong Un or a failed attempt to escape. Once you're labeled a traitor, it's a life sentence in a hellish prison with no way out. But what's even more chilling is that the punishment doesn't stop with the person who offended the regime. Entire families are punished, with children, even infants, being born into the label of guilt. In a society where fear keeps everyone in check, most people are too terrified to speak out, even though they long for justice. The crimes that lead to imprisonment in North Korea are truly shocking. Just listening to music or watching foreign films can land a person in a labor camp for many years. Making an international phone call, something considered ordinary in most places, can be seen as a serious offense, potentially leading to a death sentence. Even falling asleep while Kim Jong Un is speaking or failing to show respect for portraits of the Kim family can result in harsh punishment. In one case, a woman was arrested for saving her child during a fire instead of rescuing a portrait of the former leader. Life in North Korea is bound by strict, suffocating rules. Women must wear long skirts, only men are allowed to drive, and jeans or bikinis are absolutely forbidden. The country observes solemn memorials for the leaders, and even weddings must align with the state calendar. If a woman has 3 children, the government takes them away to raise until they turn 4. No one is allowed to have a name similar to that of the leaders, and everyone must live in designated areas chosen by the government. Military service is mandatory in North Korea. Men serve for 10 years, women for 7, with no room for evasion. If you have 3 children, the government strips you of your parental rights and takes them into state custody. This is all due to the country's dangerously low birth rate. These are not myths or rumors, but the grim reality revealed by those fortunate enough to escape. The darkest secrets of North Korea's prison camps have only come to light through the stories of those who managed to escape. Known as a mysterious kingdom, North Korea does not allow outsiders to verify its truth. However, the accounts of survivors have unveiled the cruelty of the regime. Among these harrowing stories, one man stands out as the only person to escape from Camp 14, the most notorious prison in North Korea. What he revealed after his escape shocked the world. His journey serves as a painful living testimony to a terrifying reality, where atrocities surpass anything the human mind can imagine. Camp 14, the most brutal prison in North Korea. Camp 14 is one of the most terrifying places in North Korea, a vast, desolate stretch of land spanning 60 square miles, where hope is a word that doesn't exist. Known as the Con prison, it is home to those deemed enemies of the state, political prisoners, and anyone who poses a threat to the regime. But the cruelty of Camp 14 doesn't stop with the prisoners. It extends to their children who are born and raised inside the camp, paying for the sins of their parents. Shin Dong-huk, for example, grew up in this hellhole because of something his father never even did. He spent his entire childhood there until, against all odds, he escaped in his 20s. Children like him were stripped of their childhoods, never knowing a world outside the wire fences, a world where freedom wasn't just a distant dream, but a reality. Camp 14 isn't just a place for punishing people who speak out against the regime, it's a place where any chance of a different life is crushed. Anyone accused of even the smallest infraction, like criticizing the government or failing to meet their work quotas, can end up here. These crimes are often made up with no real evidence or trial, and prisoners have no rights to defend themselves. Worse still, it's not just the offenders who suffer. Sometimes their children are born into this nightmare, never knowing anything but life behind bars. They live and die without ever having the opportunity to see the world beyond. Known as a total control zone, Camp 14 is a place where hope is a foreign concept. Prisoners work endlessly from 5:30 a.m. to midnight, doing grueling labor in mines, fields, or factories producing paper, rubber, food, shoes, and cement. And there's no escape. The camp is designed to trap people forever, with no way out and no mercy. For those unlucky enough to end up there, life is a never-ending cycle of suffering. Escaping is something only the rarest few even dare to dream about, and for those like Shin Dong-huk who manage to flee, freedom comes at a terrible cost. The scars from what they've endured stay with them, haunting them long after they've escaped. The prisoners at Camp 14 live under such harsh conditions that their only choice is to survive by any means necessary. Some try to secure jobs in the livestock section, hoping they can sneak some food meant for the animals to secretly supplement their meager rations, just pickled cabbage and dried corn. But this is only a small comfort in the sea of suffering. The prisoners who live in this grim place often face unimaginable health problems: blackened gums, missing teeth, emaciated bodies, and many die in agony due to mistreatment, illness, accidents, or severe malnutrition. With no way out and lives hanging by a thread, the prisoners in Camp 14 are forced to eat whatever they can find to stay alive: bugs, frogs, rats, snakes, and even human flesh. These horrifying meals are what help them hold on to life in a world filled with constant dread. But the deprivation they suffer is nothing compared to the cruelty they face from the guards. Hunger, cold, and relentless violence are daily realities, and the torment doesn't end with just the physical abuse. But then, one day, there was someone who made it out. Shin Dong-huk was the only person ever to escape from Camp 14, and what he revealed about the horrors inside shocked the world. His story and the chilling details he shared exposed the true level of cruelty and inhumanity people are forced to endure in this place. Born in the darkness of Camp 14, Shin Dong-huk's life was doomed from the start. He wasn't a typical child, but a product of a brutal system that didn't even allow him the basic human right to choose his own spouse. His father, Shin Gung-sub, was a prisoner who was allowed to marry his mother, Jang Hai-gung, but their marriage wasn't born out of love. It was a reward for good behavior at the hands of the guards. From the moment he was born, Shin Dong-hyuk had no concept of true love. He was raised by his mother, as his father was hardly present, coming and going without any real connection, and to young Shin, his parents weren't loving figures but criminals. He was constantly reminded by the guards that he had to suffer because of the sins of his parents. Hatred and fear consumed him, shaping him into a boy growing up in a world of unrelenting sorrow and darkness. Camp 14 wasn't just a prison, it was a place without hope. Children like Shin were subjected to tragedies beyond what most adults could even imagine. Shin witnessed constant violence, public executions, and brutal beatings. Once, he was punished harshly for breaking a sewing machine. His fingers were severed as a punishment, a cruel act that left a permanent scar on his mind. But to survive, Shin had to adapt. He started hunting for rats, bugs, and frogs. He even began betraying fellow prisoners, turning them in for rewards from the guards. Survival in this world meant learning one harsh lesson: only you can save yourself, even if it means sacrificing others. The biggest shock came when Shin was just 13. One night, while eating thin corn porridge, he overheard his mother and older brother planning an escape. His brother had already fled from the cement factory, and his mother was preparing rice, the symbol of survival and prosperity in North Korea. Overcome with jealousy, Shin rushed to report them to the night guard, hoping for a reward, but the truth hit him hard. The guard had already discovered the plan and caught his mother and brother. No reward for him, just betrayal and anguish. For 4 terrifying days, Shin endured severe beatings simply because he was suspected of knowing about the escape plan. The scars from those days remain on his body, permanent reminders of the pain he endured. But that was only the beginning of his torment. After being locked in a dark concrete cell for 7 months, Shin was released, but not to return to freedom. Instead, he had to witness an unimaginable horror. He and his father were forced to watch the public execution of his mother and brother. At just 13 years old, his young mind twisted by this cruel world, Shin didn't feel sorrow for them. Instead, he thought they deserved it for breaking the rules of the camp. He was angry because they hadn't included him in their escape plan. Years later, in a shocking interview, Shin confessed, "My poor mother and brother. If I could meet them again through a time machine, I would go back and apologize." The pain of that moment haunted him for the rest of his life. After all that Shin had endured, he found himself with no choice but to lower his head and take a job at a textile factory. But his life would take another unexpected turn when he met Park, a 40-year-old political prisoner from Pyongyang. Park had once lived a relatively normal life, having traveled through East Germany and China, and even claimed to have shaken hands with Kim Jong Un. His stories of the outside world were like a window to a life Shin had never imagined. To Shin, the food and places Park described were like something out of a dream, things he never thought were possible. Having grown up eating only cabbage, corn, and the occasional insect, he couldn't help but feel a yearning for the things Park described: freedom, endless food, and the possibility of a life outside. In a later interview, Shin would admit, "I still think of freedom as a roasted chicken." With that longing for freedom burning deep inside him, Shin made the bold decision to escape with Park. They devised a careful plan. Shin would gather information about the prison, and Park, with his knowledge of the outside world, would help them break free. On January 2nd, 2005, they were assigned to work near the electrified fence, gathering firewood on the mountainside. That was when they saw their chance. There was a long gap between guard shifts. It was their window to make a run for it. But things didn't go as planned. As Park tried to scale the fence, he was instantly electrocuted. Shin was devastated but refused to give up. He used Park's lifeless body as a shield, hoping it would protect him from the electric shock. Miraculously, he made it over the fence, but at a great cost. Shin suffered severe burns, and the scars on his legs would be a constant reminder of that moment. It was a painful, heartbreaking moment, but it also marked the end of his time in that hellish camp and the start of his journey to freedom. Once he escaped, Shin found himself in a strange and unfamiliar world. He had to learn to survive in a society where he didn't know the rules. He managed to find an old military uniform in a farmer's shed, which he used as a disguise. Pretending to be a soldier, Shin began stealing rice from local homes to survive. In time, he even learned to understand money, something that was completely foreign to him. Rice became his currency, used to trade for food, cigarettes, and even protection from the border guards who were his last hurdle to freedom. Using what little he had, he made his way across the border into China. But Shin's journey didn't end there. Over the next few months, he worked various manual labor jobs in cities across China until one fateful day when he was spotted by a reporter in Shanghai. Instead of reporting him, the reporter took him to the South Korean embassy, where Shin finally found the asylum he had been dreaming of. But even then, freedom didn't come easy. The South Korean authorities were suspicious of him, worried he might be a North Korean spy or assassin. Only after a thorough investigation did they believe his story. Shin told them about the horrors of Camp 14, a place where he had lived like a prisoner, where everything could be erased with a single word from the guards. Shin's story is not just one of escape from hell, it's a testament to his extraordinary resilience, but his freedom came at a heavy price. The North Korean regime wasn't about to let him get away with telling the truth. As soon as Shin shared his story with the outside world, the government quickly released a video to discredit him. In the video, they claimed he hadn't grown up in the prison camp at all. Instead, they said he had worked at a mine and escaped after attacking a 13-year-old girl. They even showed images of his father, threatening that he would suffer terribly if Shin didn't retract his story. Shin was terrified that his father, the one person he had left behind, would face dire consequences. Whether his father is still alive remains a mystery to this day. Camp 15, Yodok, North Korea's underground hell. When people talk about the horrors of North Korean prison camps, it's hard to fully grasp the brutal reality prisoners face. Camp Yodok, also known as Camp 15, is a place that goes beyond simple imprisonment. It's an actual hell on earth, where humanity is stripped away and inmates are reduced to mindless laborers living in total darkness. It's a place where compassion and human dignity are completely destroyed, not only through physical torture but also through relentless brainwashing. What the North Korean government calls a re-education camp is, in fact, a machine for breaking both the bodies and spirits of those they deem enemies of the regime. Kung Kol-hwan, or Kung, is one of the few survivors to tell the tale of Camp Yodok. His story is one of survival against unimaginable odds. He spent 10 years in the hellish camp, witnessing horrors that most people would struggle to even comprehend. Kung was just a child when his family was arrested for a seemingly harmless act criticizing the government of Kim Jong Un. What appeared to be a minor political mistake turned into a tragedy for his entire family. From the moment he arrived at Yodok, Kung saw the full extent of the brutality. Men were executed before his eyes simply for being deemed enemies of the state, but the cruelty didn't end there. The guards would force the prisoners to throw stones at the bodies of the executed, leaving the corpses hanging for an entire week as a warning to anyone who might consider defying the regime. These images haunted Kung for the rest of his life, a vivid reminder of the cruelty and inhumanity that defined the North Korean prison system. Camp Yodok wasn't just a prison, it was a vast brainwashing machine, a place where prisoners weren't allowed to think or feel. They were only allowed to work, relentlessly, from dawn until dusk. Living conditions were deplorable. The prisoners slept in filthy, freezing huts with no beds or basic living supplies, only ragged clothes that had belonged to those who had died before them. They worked from the mines to factories, never given a moment of rest. But perhaps the most disturbing part was the treatment of children. Even those as young as 16 were forced to work like adults with no leniency. If they didn't meet their quotas, they were brutally punished, denied sleep, and had their already meager food rations reduced. In this society, people were no longer treated as human beings, but as machines whose sole purpose was to serve the regime. In addition to the grueling labor, prisoners were also subjected to mandatory ideological education. They were forced to memorize lectures about Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong Un, whose every action was regarded as sacred. Anyone who failed to memorize the teachings was severely punished. These lessons weren't about education, they were about indoctrination, breaking the prisoners' spirits, and erasing any sense of independent thought. The goal was to transform them into nothing more than tools of the regime. Meanwhile, for those inside Yodok prison camp, life outside is nothing but a distant dream. They are forbidden from accessing any information, have no freedom of thought, and know nothing about the outside world. Their lives revolve solely around forced labor, ideological lessons, and brutal punishments. This suffering not only destroys their bodies but also weighs heavily on their minds. However, even in that endless darkness, Kung never gave up hope. After enduring for 10 years, he decided to find a way to escape that hell. In 1992, he risked his life to escape Yodok, making his way to China and eventually reaching South Korea. What Kung revealed about life inside Yodok shocked the entire world. It is one of the most notorious labor camps in North Korea, where those imprisoned are reduced to mindless laborers, devoid of emotion or desire to live. Kung's story, along with those of other survivors, uncovered the dark secrets of North Korea, a country where the right to life is stripped away and hope is a distant concept. More importantly, they are the only ones left, the survivors, who can tell their story. Their stories of survival and unimaginable suffering have made the world listen, and no one will ever forget. Imagine a place where life and death are separated by a mere thread, where physical and mental pain are enveloped in an endless darkness. This is the reality faced every day by millions of prisoners in North Korea. Have you ever wondered how such horrors could exist? Please share your thoughts on this brutality in the comments below. We eagerly await your feedback. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to like and share the message. And if you want to explore more stories, be sure to visit our channel. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and we look forward to seeing you in our next explorative video.